I'm Sharon Brett Kelly, and we've just arrived at Waiheke Island in the Hauraki Gulf, and it's the most beautiful midwinter's morning, Monday morning. We're just about to dock, I think you would say, at the wharf, so there's a bit of noise here. So the ferry's about half full. If this was midsummer, this ferry would be chock-a-block. And even to get on it in Auckland, you'd be queuing for a long, long time. And that's the issue. Is this what you call over-tourism? And with me today is my colleague Davina Zimmer. Davina, we're here to find out why some Waiheke locals are calling for a cap on tourist numbers.
Yes, I mean, it's because, we're hearing more and more stories of people living in their cars, living in sheds, living in garages, because there's just not enough long-term rentals on Waiheke because all of the properties are being taken up by Airbnb listings, seasonal workers, stuff like that. I mean, so to put this into perspective, there's an island of just about 10,000 residents, and there's about 700 Airbnb listings on this island. So it's quite a lot of short-term rentals, not enough long-term rentals is what other people are saying. So we're here to kind of find out what the deal is.
Squeaky car. That's all right. Right, well, we're sitting in the car with you, Paul. Can you say your full name and...
Yep, so Paul Walden, and I'm a member of the local board on Waiheke Island.
And we're driving up, we've just got off the ferry, driving up to Oniroa. And Paul, how long have you lived here for?
I've lived here since I was around 14 years old, so goodness me, that's over 30 years. My mother grew up here and my grandparents lived here also, so...
Wow, you would have seen a lot of change.
Yes, from a remote rural community to a very popular tourist destination that it is today, which plays a significant role in Auckland's tourist economy.
As a frequent visitor to Waiheke Island, I've done the winery tours, I've camped here over the years with the kids. I mean, it's an absolute paradise.
Absolutely.
And the beauty of it is that it's 40 minutes from this downtown Auckland.
Yes.
I mean, look at this, we're just driving through Oniroa.
With the back road of Oniroa. So this is a residential heartland on Waiheke, and many of the houses spring up as available for short-term rentals on Airbnb or Book a Batch or Booking.com, and certainly not the thriving hub of residential family Waiheke that it would have been 10, 15, 20 years ago. On any one of these streets there might be a handful of houses that are occupied permanently. The remainder of them will either be family batches or available for short-term rental.
What's wrong with that?
At many levels there's nothing wrong with that. From a community perspective, we haven't got a balance in that we haven't provided for the sustainability of our community on Waiheke. And the issues that we're facing are issues which have been faced in all popular tourist destinations globally. Many of those other areas have responded through regulation or a greater provision of social or community-owned housing that ensures that the diversity of your community can afford to live and stay here. And one of the real challenges and impacts that I've witnessed raising my children here is that unless families are in a position of either owning their house or their family owning their house, they're just about itinerant residents on the island. They haven't been able to sustain an existence here, and that's where the issue rests.
Oh.
The lapping waves are a much nicer background sound, aren't
They are in the truck. Do you want to hold that one, Paul?
Yeah, sure.
And we just hold it like that. Oh, this is beautiful. The tide is in here at Surfdale, and there is, apart from us, one person sitting there. But then we turn around and tell me about what we're looking at here, Paul.
So behind us we're looking at the emergency housing establishment that's been set up by a local church. There's quite a number of small pod-type structures like porta-com buildings, and there's communal kitchen and bathroom facilities there. And
$1 million property, I have to say.
Yeah, quite some foresight when they purchased this. But essentially they're providing emergency housing in one of the sectors which is heavily impacted by the housing issues on Waiheke, is housing for for our seniors.
Is there enough of them?
No, there's not. And so the type of cabins that you're looking at there, they're a feature of Waiheke residential properties. Cabins set up in the backyard or garages converted.
So is it a problem of over-tourism or something more complex? Davina stopped in Oniroa to talk to locals about it.
The rental situation is very insecure for people.
When we first moved out here, there were plenty of rentals, and then after the lockdown, they just completely dropped off.
There's a number of people that own houses, they don't necessarily live in them all year, and they're left empty for months on end and things, but they're not interested in renting them.
But I think Airbnb probably has a massive part to play in the shortage of long-term rental properties being available.
And what do you think about the number of tourists that come to the island?
Well, we're artists here, so we sell to the tourists. So if we don't have tourists coming, we don't sell our work. I'd like to see some changes around the housing. There's, tiny houses and things like that going up, but it's also, we've got to have septic tanks, and you can't just slap a little place up.
It's not so much the tourists coming, it's the people who have multiple properties that they don't live in that are leaving a lot of houses empty. Lots of people are living in their cars or leaving the island permanently.
There's a lot of people advertising on our community notice board on Facebook looking for accommodation, and there's just nothing around.
And I mean, there's been discussion as a potential solution being a cap on tourists. What do you think about that?
That's ridiculous. Yeah. No, we need as many tourists as possible, especially in winter.
So it's complicated. And to add to all this, houses that don't meet the healthy home standards can't be long-term rentals, but they can be rented out as holiday homes. Back to the beach with Paul. There'll be a meeting with the council about all this in October, but for 6 years, locals have been asking for interventions to ease restrictions on building houses.
Oh, I think we're beyond a tipping point. Absolutely. Yeah, we're well beyond the tipping point. Even having this conversation and reaching out to people that might be in tenuous housing conditions and their fear of talking to the media because that might impact on their security of housing. The obvious people to reach out to, sadly, are people that have left the island because they can't get stable housing.
We've been over here before, and
yes.
And people have told us, locals have said, there are people who live in cars because they've got...
Yeah, totally. Yep.
And I just wondered if we were able to drive around and maybe you could point out some of those places without giving them away.
So we can... another area that's a good showcase, which is easy, is and it's just over the hill on the way to Julia's. There's a beach area where there's a whole lot of boats.
Oh yeah.
So people are actually living on boats pulled up on the beach.
Oh, okay.
And it's whilst I know there's a lot of people living in cars, it's actually difficult to track them down.
Is it?
During the day because they'll be at work. There's families at school that live in cars. Wow. Literally, whole families. But Dad will be at work and the kids will be at school.
How can they be living in a family be living in a car?
I've got no idea.
Okay. So Paul, we've pulled up to another inlet here.
Yes.
This is
So this is Putiki Bay in Ostend. It's a tidal estuary. As we look around the foreshore here, there's maybe a dozen or so boats that are pulled in close to the beach. Mm-hmm. And most of these boats will be providing housing.
Some of them look a bit rough and ready, I have to say.
Some of them are quite rough and ready. Yeah.
I mean, they wouldn't be seaworthy.
No, that's right.
One over there that looks.
But for the people that are living on them, it's safe, affordable accommodation that enables them to live and work in their community.
What's the alternative if they don't live on these boats?
For many of these people, they wouldn't be able to live and work on Waiheke because there's just no available rental housing for them.
And it wouldn't be ideal, would it?
No, this is not a humane solution to housing.
Things like toilets, showers, some of these boats wouldn't have that. Some of them are pretty small.
Correct. So there are some public toilets further along the beach here, and there's some showers that are available to the public at the sports ground. maybe 5 kilometres from here, but they're heavily used by people that are living in boats and cars and otherwise in, poor housing.
Would these people, would they be classified as homeless?
Yes, they would.
So do you have any idea how many people are in this situation on the island?
There have been some surveys done. I don't have access to those figures offhand.
Well, by the sounds of it, it's dozens.
Oh, absolutely. Hundreds.
Hundreds?
Yep.
You're saying hundreds on an island of
Correct.
less than 10,000?
Yep.
Does that in itself, having people here living on boats, is it tolerated by local people? Is it...
It's certainly accepted.
It's accepted?
Yeah.
Okay. You know, just looking at this bay here, this is the contrast of Waiheke Island. Yes, you've got your little dinghies here on the shore, and then a few boats out there that look pretty run down, and then further out there are some pretty beautiful looking boats that you need a bit of money to own. And
Yes.
then you look at the hills around, very ordinary houses, batches,
Yes.
and then in the distance some mansions.
That's right. Multi-million dollar homes. The owners are absolutely justified, but many of those will be holiday homes that, might be inhabited for a month a year if they're lucky.
We're walking down a steep pathway to a house surrounded by tropical bush to meet a woman who has struggled for years to find a secure rental home.
You sure? Oh my God.
Julia Kate Mack, a third-generation Waihekean, a full-time potter, a single mum with 2 primary school children and a dog.
It's not easy, yeah. It's since my kids were born, I've had to move 5 times, 5 houses, each time not by choice.
And what happens? Why do you have to move?
Usually, you see how many homes are for sale on this island. It's just change of circumstances. People have decided to sell, or sometimes you don't get to know why. The rental agency won't tell you why. You just don't have your lease renewed. It's as simple as that. Just in the letterbox. Sorry, we're not renewing your lease. That's all that it is.
Okay,
Yeah.
And what's it like when you go looking for a rental? Because that's what we're hearing, is there's just hardly any rental houses here on the property,
Yeah.
on the island.
You just get this really terrible feeling in the gut of your stomach where you're just like, oh God, you look on the rental listings and there'll be say 8 listings, and half of those listings are over $1,000 a week, and so then you have to narrow it down again. And to make matters worse, I have a dog, and so then you have to narrow it down again. And I always think having a dog, having young children, there were so many obstacles for me. And then later on, after my relationship dissolved, then you become a solo mum of 2 kids and a dog, and so it's even harder. It's been like that for years. A long time ago, I remember it was the elderly, and they were slowly there was nowhere for them to be because obviously they don't work. And then it went out to the solo mothers or solo parents, and then it went out to working class families, and then eventually it was just families in general,
Who just can't find a rental place.
Who just can't find
an
a rental.
affordable rental place.
Yeah.
Or a rental place full stop.
No rentals. So there have been 2 occasions where I've moved out of a home and not had another home to move into. And so I've, sometimes we call them little rent holidays, where we're like, this is a holiday, we don't have to pay rent, so we're just going to go and do a little bit of travel and see if something comes up. And then you're like, well, we do want to move back into a home, the kids have to go back to school.
How could your situation and that of other renters be made better here on the island?
It's all wrapped up with the whole Airbnb situation. There are so many empty homes on this island. There are so many homes that could be rented out to long-term tenants, but homeowners prefer to rent them out in the short term and be able to come over and stay when they want to stay. There was one scheme where the renters maybe moved out for a little bit over summer. And we did that once with our landlords. We knew the arrangement in the beginning and we said, yeah, that's fine, you can come and spend time with your family here in your batch. But that can be quite stressful, and it comes with lots of different terms, depending on the landlords.
Such as?
Well, you know, anytime you have to have an inspection or anything, you get the house tidy. But if you've got people coming to stay in the house for 2 weeks, then there's a whole different thing. You have to put stuff away, you have to make it all, you have to set it up appropriately.
Do you resent tourists?
No, I don't resent tourists. I think that it's wonderful that they come over and get to experience our country.
Do you resent the people who operate Airbnbs here on the island?
No, I'm really not a resentful person. I do sometimes feel a bit helpless and about the situation, because I feel like what can be done to change it? Nothing really. We've seen over the years it just gets worse and worse and worse.
Kia ora, it's Kat.
G'day Kat, it's Paul Walden here.
Hello, lovely. Nice to hear your voice.
We're cold calling Kat Vosper, co-owner of restaurant and vineyard Casita Miro. I want to get a take from someone whose business depends on tourists, but is also affected by the housing shortage.
We're about 3 minutes away if you're free now.
All right.
You benefit from tourists, right? People coming here for the day, but there's an issue here on the island in that tourism has created a problem. Would you agree with that?
I wouldn't agree with that at all. I would say that tourism has created opportunities, employment, robustness and deep happiness.
But there's an imbalance here, isn't there, on the island? There's not enough rentals, local people, there's people living in cars, there's people living in garages. How do you see it?
I wouldn't say that there is a crisis. I think what there is an imbalance in terms of the fact that there is not enough short-term rental accommodation for our summer people. And over the years, many industry bodies, we've attempted to find solutions for this, and we've been stymied. For instance, you know, there's a lovely youth hostel down the road with 36 beds, and the only way that we can use that for short-term accommodation for our summer workers is to buy it and pay it forward, which of course is a very difficult thing to ask businesses to do. In addition to that, the huge amount of holiday houses just take out the accommodation potential for our summer people. And we've just noticed over the years that more and more houses are being snapped up for people who come sometimes just a few weeks per year.
What do you do then? You know, if you can't find housing for your workers, how do you get around that?
We've had to buy a house here at Casita Miro, and most of the year it's pretty empty, but over the summer it's full. Some of my colleagues, as I said earlier, they will rent a house if they can find it. Sometimes when things become quite critical, opening hours have had to be reduced because there aren't enough staff to manage that, and it is a real problem for the island.
The numbers of tourists who come to the island every year hit a peak of close to 1 million before COVID. We're not at that number yet, but are you happy for the numbers of tourists to grow, to keep growing?
I think sustainable growth is a great thing, and there's so many jobs that are dependent on the tourism industry here, and you know, so long as the island can look after these people, it's a great thing.
So what you want is for the council to relax its regulations so that you can build dormitories, build accommodation, ensure that there is somewhere for the workers to live.
That would be a lovely thing to happen. I don't know.
You don't think it's going to?
It seems to be a fairly intractable force.
So there's a few remnant sort of Waiheke batches, weatherboard cottages, but mostly now they're fairly modern big homes.
Yeah. We're driving along Onitangi waterfront now, on the most famous, the best beach in Waiheke, and it is really house after house of the curtains are drawn, nobody home.
Yeah.
So these majority along here would be holiday homes, Paul?
Yeah, I think almost universally. Yeah, we had one full-time resident on the beachfront here, but he's recently passed on.
One?
Yeah.
So all of these houses are holiday homes?
Yep. Correct. There's some dwellings that are further up the hill a little bit, but universally these are holiday homes down here now. Yeah.
You know, there's obviously different tensions within Waiheke about what the problem is. Is it over-tourism? Is it not over-tourism? And different groups or individuals have different solutions. But Kat pointed out something really interesting in that there is a plan, and it's with Auckland Council.
Yes.
And it's based on a UNESCO tourism plan for communities.
I think the template for the plan was based on a UNESCO World Tourism Organisation framework, which will be intended to be a sustainable framework for community development. Certainly the draft version of the plan that I saw, identified a lot of these issues that we've been talking and learning about today. My concern is that the output of the plan is not actually providing a pathway to address some of or many of these issues that are actually impacting on our community.
Oh, okay. So you don't think it's the complete solution?
Correct. Yep. I don't think it's gone far enough, and I expect that the plan will have compartmentalised some things as outside of their control, being Auckland Tourism and Economic Development. And therefore we're not going to see a joined up sustainable tourism plan, which is really what we desperately need.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of underpins all of the issues that we've been talking about today. And if we could get to that point, it would be a good thing. You
need a drawn up sustainable tourism plan, but you also need a drawn up housing plan, don't you?
Well, they're interrelated.
Yeah.
I think a sustainable tourism plan that identifies the issues and takes us down a path of identifying the solutions and a pathway to realise those, that would definitely be a good thing.
Yeah.
And the likes of Kat and, other people that are contributing from the community, they're at the coalface of the issues. And you can pick that up from Kat, the different interventions that different people have sought to achieve an outcome, and they've been shackled by the regulatory environment, which needs to be addressed in some areas.
If I went to council though and said, look, there's this issue on Waiheke Island, it's serious, and the locals have been looking for answers from the council for years, who would I even go to?
Well, I think the council would direct you to ATEED, to Auckland Tourism.
Yeah. But they're not going to solve the
No, they're
housing.
not going to. So, and I guess that's part of my challenge. Is it needs to be a more whole of council response. That council's putting its hand up and wanting to address at every level, from
taking it seriously.
Yeah, taking some responsibility and providing support around social housing, and there's opportunities here for that.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't be shackled by the same rules or the same policy settings that exist across the Auckland Isthmus, because there's a totally different subset of issues.
That's all for today. The Detail is a newsroom production produced by RNZ and NZ On Air. Thank you to Paul Walden, Julia Kate Mack and Kat Vosper. This episode was engineered by Phil Benj and produced by Davina Zimmer and Gwen McClure. I'm Sharon Brett Kelly. Mā te wā.